the Europeans are going to be at that table between the Americans and the Russians means that we have the same problem that we always have in this, which is Russia making its maximalist demands, getting accepted by the Americans.
There are more US-Russian talks expected to take place today. Kremlin officials are due to meet Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's envoy, in Miami. Ahead of that meeting, Ukraine attacked a Russian oil tanker in the Mediterranean Sea, the first strike of its kind in the nearly 4-year-long war. Let's speak to Catherine Philp, the Times World Affairs editor, who's in Lviv. Good morning to you, Catherine.
Good morning, Clary.
So first of all, what hope for these meetings today? And I say that with a slight sigh because we've been here so many times, haven't we?
Indeed, and I think that's how people in Ukraine feel too. They're almost starting to zone out this process because it's been going on and has been cyclical for so many months now. I think that certainly we've seen a statement of intent on the part of the Europeans, the fact that they've advanced Ukraine this loan so that it has the means to stay in the fight, even if America is kind of now out of that material support for Ukraine any longer. So that's something. Although, again, even that loan has been weakened by the fact that Europe couldn't reach an agreement on actually taking possession of these frozen Russian assets and using them. Nonetheless, it is money, and they have also had European and Ukrainian input into the peace plan that the Americans and the Russians will sit down over. The fact that neither the Ukrainians or the Europeans are going to be at that table between the Americans and the Russians means that we have the same problem that we always have in this, which is Russia making its maximalist demands, getting accepted by the Americans, and then being met by, cries of opposition from Europe and from Ukraine, and back to the drawing board. Yeah. Possibly the only real positive as far as the Ukrainians have seen right now, apart from the European backing, is Rubio's statement that it won't be forced into a deal.
Yeah. When you speak to Ukrainians, do you get a sense that you said that they're sort of zoning out on the negotiations. Do they feel let down that those frozen assets, Russian assets, haven't been used and instead it's a loan, or are they just still so grateful for that support?
I think they're grateful for that support. I think that to be honest, that's at a kind of granular level that, the ordinary Ukrainians are just, still just not able to really tune into anymore when they have so many issues at home, like the fact they have no power, the fact they're, continuing to be hit by Russian drones and missiles. So that's kind of a level of detail that's pretty much, not relevant on the street these days. I think it's more relevant to the position of Europe geopolitically that it's shown itself unable to come together as a bloc. And that's a bigger issue for Ukraine's long term, not a day-to-day one.
How significant do you think it was, the striking of the Russian oil tanker by Ukraine? As we said, first time a strike of that kind during the war. Does that give a kind of morale boost?
Definitely a morale boost. People here did take notice of that and were pleased by it. I think we need to see it in the context of the negotiations, of the talks happening, because what's happening really on the battlefield is that Russia, while still moving slowly, it has got the upper hand at the moment. What Ukraine's chosen to do is show that it can open up another front, striking a completely different theatre and using the kind of weaponry that it's not disadvantaged by Russia. So Russia having more of the heavy weaponry, Ukraine having that nimble use drone warfare at distance and strike as far as the Mediterranean. So, that's a sign for them. It's a morale boost, but it's also a warning to Russia that it's not just sanctions it has to look out for with this lifeline of sanctions busting oil exports, that Ukraine can actually take action against it doing that as well.
I understand that you have been to part of the Donbas region, which is still controlled by Ukraine, but Putin wants to be handed over as part of a peace deal. I mean, how are people feeling there right now?
Pretty embattled. So I was in Sloviansk. There's essentially a sort of chain of towns and cities that form the fortress belt of the Donbas that is still under Ukrainian control. And that fortification line came up after 2014, after Russia first got involved in the Donbas, and it's meant to serve as a defense really for the whole country. So the people in Sloviansk can feel the front line getting closer and closer to them. The sound of shelling is growing. There are more attacks on them day to day. And, now, for example, train services have stopped to the city, so they're feeling quite cut off. They're nervous, obviously, at the notion that Putin is after those towns and wants them handed over without a fight, because although people say, that it could take Russia about 2 years to take those towns, if ever, because they are well fortified, the idea that they may be handed over in negotiations is not only threatening to the people there who don't want to live under Russian rule, but also the fact that it would then jeopardize the rest of the country and really allow the Russians to take another shot at the rest of the country anytime they want it.
So does that mean that people were telling you that when you were there, that if it was to be handed over, that where they lived was to be handed over to the Russians, that they would be forced to leave? They couldn't possibly stay?
The vast majority said they would leave, yes. Yeah. Some said they wouldn't, and they tended to be the older people, some of them who have, an affinity with Russia, or, remember the time, have lived most of their life under the Soviet Union, and, are simply so weary of the war that they'd like to see the fighting stop. I mean, I did have one older lady say to me that she didn't care who was in control of Sloviansk. She just wanted the fighting to stop. I mean, she burst into tears as she was saying this. So, I wouldn't underestimate the level of weariness. But most of the younger people said that they wouldn't stay to see it get that bad. They would leave as if they felt that the Russians were at the gates.
Gosh, it's heartbreaking stuff, isn't it? Catherine, thank you so much for speaking to us. That's Catherine Philp there, the Times World Affairs editor.
We had a long discussion, and things are seemingly going well, but we've been saying that for a long time. We had a very good conversation 1 hour ago with the European leaders, many of them involving the war with Russia and Ukraine. We had a long discussion, and things are seemingly going well, but we've been saying that for a long time, and it's a difficult one. There was some killing going on that shouldn't have happened, and we appreciate them working. The security protocols yesterday were amazing, and they have been amazing, having to do with Russia and Ukraine. And I had a long talk with President Zelensky. Also, I spoke with the heads of Germany, Italy, NATO, Finland, France, the United Kingdom, Poland, Norway, Denmark, and the Netherlands. We had very long and very good talks. And again, I think things are going along pretty well. Nobody's seen anything like it, actually, since World War II. But and I think we're closer now, and they will tell you that they're closer now. We had numerous conversations with President Putin of Russia, and I think we're closer now than we have been ever, and we'll see what we can do. We want to save a lot of lives. We sell equipment to NATO. We don't spend any money, but we do want to see if we can save a lot of lives. And at this moment, Russia wants to get it, and the problem is but we're getting closer. We're having tremendous support from European leaders. They want to get it ended also. And at this moment, Russia wants to get it ended. The problem is they'll want to get it ended, and then all of a sudden they won't. And Ukraine will want to get it ended, and all of a sudden they won't. So we have to get them on the same page. But I think that's working along. Very good talk. So we have to get them on the same page. But I think that's working along. Very good talk. I want to see it end. They want to see it end. I actually think that President Putin wants to see it end. I've had good talks. We've had good talks with Russia, and I think they'd like to get back to a more normal way of life. And he was afraid to do anything, but he puts Tina in jail for 9 years because she caught people cheating. In terms of security guarantee, we're working with Europe on it. Europe would be a big part of that. And we're working on the security guarantee so the war doesn't start up again. We don't want to have a war start up again. You know, as I said, she was cheating. She wasn't cheating. She caught people cheating on the election, 2020.
Have you recently spoken directly to Putin?
Yeah, I have. But there's no doubt that America's adversaries are trafficking fentanyl into the United States, in part because they want to kill America.